Hi, I'm the Now Visitor, and you are watching Trek Culture.
So, the news, which basically dropped in the last couple of hours, just before we sat down to record this, is that. So, last week, the world, bored of all of this news, but still forced to read it all, was that Warner Brothers, the film and streaming section of Warner Brothers, has been. Or basically, Netflix has won the bid at a stupidly amount of money to purchase that section of Warner Bros. I think it's $82 billion. Whatever, the money's not real, so it's fine.
Yeah.
So this annoyed CEO of Paramount Skydance Corporation, David Ellison, who has been trying to secure this deal for quite some time. We've touched on it in various news videos, but yes, he would like to bring Warner Brothers in under the Paramount banner. And then it looked like when Netflix secured the bid, looked like, okay, that's the end of that. Well, it is not the end of that, apparently, because Paramount have come in with what is being described as a hostile bid for $107 billion to basically sweep Netflix out of the deal and purchase Warner Brothers that way. They are apparently appealing directly to the shareholders and the board of directors to do this. I confess I'm not 100% on how the process works. I only have myself 50 billion, so I wouldn't be in the room for this. And so I'm just like, I think my initial feeling is, what are both of your feelings on this?
Brandon, as the guest, you may go first.
Oh, how gracious of you. Thank you. Obviously, we don't like, well, I mean, we as in the group of us, I assume world as a whole, but who knows? We don't really like monopolies, and this is exactly what's going on. I mean, we already live in a world where, like, 90% of media, not just in the US, but across the world, is owned by, like, a total of 6 corporations. So this is literally just making it so much harder for anyone who doesn't already have like an established body of work or have their own backing and funding to get into it, to like actually be able to make art. And then of course talking about the difference in like the medium where Netflix is primarily streaming, and of course that's what they're buying, but Warner Bros. Also does theatrical releases. They make big films, and that sounds like Netflix's plan is to move that more into streaming specifically to raise that revenue, and I just don't see that as a good thing.
No, it's none of this is a good thing for me. This whole saga has been quite depressing. I was thinking about like Warner Brother films, and I think obviously the most successful ones in the recent years have been something like Harry Potter, right? And those were, very successful series of films that now whoever wins this thing, if Netflix has Warner Brothers, the concept of Netflix owning something like that is so successful is scary to me, because they can now run, and I might be wrong, maybe Warner Brothers doesn't even own the rights to make Harry Potter movies anymore, but they could be like, cool, we've got the next 50 years, there's going to be a Harry Potter movie every 2 years, and blah blah blah, and it's just a scary time for art, when all these huge corporations own it. If you think about that story, the famous story that you might know from Lord of the Rings, where Peter Jackson was going about to every single company trying to get them to pick it up, blah blah blah. If he was doing like this, like these days, he would, walk into one building and get told no, and then go, "Well, I guess I tried." Like, it's very scary when so much is owned by so few people. I was saying beforehand as well that like it's the same thing happened with the publishing industry. Like, I think there's like 3, maybe 4 publishers now, basically, like big publishers that own all that stuff, and like in one case, like something to make you hopefully have some sort of hope is that, and I'm using the publishing industry as like a example, the rise of indie publishers and self-publishing and all that stuff happened. I mean, it's been going on for a while, but I believe it's had a boom because of how the industry has been going. And also, there's loads of other stuff that goes, you can go into the weeds of with how those corporations actually handle book deals and marketing and blah, blah, blah. But there's a huge rise of that. And that kind of like punk mentality always happens when it comes to art, So this could be another case of that. You have people like A24 and those companies that are like, come in, make interesting, cheaper movies, and you swoop under and grab the attention of critics and audiences and things like that. So like there is a hope that although this is happening, it means that there's a new wave of people that are trying to take that sort of power back. But it is scary, and also in a time where streaming services and how they run and how it works is still so new and so secret that it's just a bit like, well, what happens now? What's the next phase? And that doesn't even take into account of how Paramount have been just bought after all the years of that being a thing. And as soon as that happens, Paramount now is like, well, we're going to buy you. So it's just like, it's a snake eating its own tail.
According to the Hollywood Reporter there, which is, I just have that open in front of me, one of their things that they're sort of saying to help their bid is they want to get this deal done in under a year. Because I'm sure, like you've mentioned, it does feel like the words Paramount and merger are permanently stamped on my long-term memory. And as it was, it was only in August of this year that I want to say 4-year process of the Paramount Skydance merger. It might not have been that long, but it was a while that merger finally went through. And so if I put aside the horrified artist in me for a second and I'm trying to put on my business hat, I can see that being very appealing. If, say, Warner Brothers want a quick sale and Paramount have the money, that I can absolutely see that as being a selling point. And something that we talked about just before we started recording here, Brandon, that you mentioned as well, obviously, is that Paramount have been very vocal about theatrical releases and about basically getting people to go back to cinemas. So I can also see that being very attractive for cinema chains and, people who have a vested interest there. Directors like Christopher Nolan have come out against or at least expressed their concerns, about the Netflix Warner Brothers merger. Again, same reason, because CEO of Netflix, Ted Sarandos, has said they, doesn't believe that the current release module for, exclusivity for theatrical releases suits the consumer well, which is his way of saying he wants to get everything on streaming, allegedly. But so I can absolutely see why it would be attractive to go with Paramount. On the flip side, it is quite scary that, biggest wallet wins, because this is something we actually talked about during the Skydance merger as well, that, if these companies can afford the legal case, contracts mean nothing.
Right.
I could just pay for a lawyer to deal with this. We'll just, that's fine. That can go on in court for as long as it needs to go. And that is concerning, because that, then goes, well, if that's always going to be the case, how does that trickle down? Don't get me wrong, trickle down economics. I'm not talking about that, because that is fake. Yeah, it's
I
a
almost jumped on that so quick.
Uh, but like, what does that look like to the indie artist? You know, I think of movie studios. Like I watched a lot of Blumhouse for a while because at least for quite some time they were good for low budget horror. You know, a lot of really impressive artists kind of got their start, or at least kind of got big through Blumhouse. You know, Lee Wanell and James Wan. You know, they have done so well with their model, James DeMonico, with The Purge, movies like that, which might not have been made in this current. Well, they're never going to make a billion, you know. Although The Last Conjuring did take in $500 million, because what is reality? And but yeah, I am worried then that if we lose that kind of thing, or if everyone has to keep reporting back to, you know, Brennan, like you mentioned, like basically there's going to be three companies running, you know, the entire movie industry, at least in the Western world. Bollywood, please save us. You know, it's concerning. And then obviously as Trekkies, concerned, because we're very much caught up in all of this as well, because what does the next Star Trek movie look like? You know, we know Academy season 1 is coming. Obviously we'll talk about that now in a few minutes, but you know, what's happening down the line, it's all a bit worrying. Brandon, you look like you have something to say there. Yeah, wonderful person.
Well, I've been thinking about what Tom had said earlier, regarding
I wouldn't do that ever if I was you. Never listen to me.
The kind of like punkification of like independent artists trying to like still defiantly make their own things and put them out and whatever. And I love one that always happens, because it always does. It's inevitable. And honestly, I think a lot of the coolest ideas come out of that, because you're not so constrained by this corporate, like, we have to be able to make this marketable and we have to make it palatable and blah 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 blah. So that, like, there's a lot of cool things that have come and will come out of that. I think the biggest problem with the idea of these few corporations controlling everything, of course they have the money, but it's more influence. Like, say Netflix does end up owning Warner Brothers. Amazon bought MGM Studios. Now there's Amazon MGM. Disney is, of course, you know, the mouse owns everything. It's a problem of not just creating the content. You also own every step of that process, from production to actually putting it out, usually these days on a streaming platform. And that's something that just can't be competed with.
Yeah. I mean, I was just having a thought, like, I mentioned earlier the snake eating its own tail, and let's go back for a moment to the late 60s and early 70s, and there's a golden age of American cinema. And you have, you know, these new film school writer directors. You've got Martin Scorsese, you've got Kubrick was before that, but he was kind of also a bit part of it. You know, you've got your Francis Ford Coppola, etc., etc. They make their own movies. They get given you know, these big budgets. They're allowed to do what they want, and they're making really interesting stuff. And they make their own studios as well, because they want to have control over their own stuff. They don't want to be owned by other people. Who was one of those people? George Lucas. And he made Star Trek. He made his own Star Trek. That was a Freudian slip. He made Star Wars. Sorry, we're on a Star Trek podcast, so it's always in my head. He made Star Wars with his own studio. And now Star Wars is owned by the big mouse in the sky. So it always will come back to the money. Where's the money? So, I mean, it's the way that, you know, try not to go too into the sort of political side of it. And trust me, there's a big political side of the Paramount stuff anyway. But in, you know, a capitalist society, which is a phrase I try not to say on the internet too much, it is always about where's the money, So, which it shouldn't be. It should be about the art, but that's not the world we live in.
Got to make line go up.
Yeah, I heard a phrase once that I really liked, which was from Fran Lebowitz, and she was saying how when like an art, what do you call it, bid thing. She said this a lot more eloquently than I did. The audience claps not for the art, but for the amount of money it gets sold for. And like that, and when you think about that, it's very depressing that we live in a world that people are clapping money and not the art itself. And when stuff like this happens, it just makes me go like, oh yeah, this is the world we live in, and it's a shame. But
it's almost like that just makes me think a little bit of, and this is going to be a left field one. So people supporting sports teams. Right, so which I am told is a thing that happens, but all right. So people supporting sports teams, and let's say they're Brandon United wins the cup. Well done, brilliant. This is fantastic. We're all applauding this. Nothing in my life has changed materially. That hasn't improved my quality of life. And then I take that and I try to apply that logic to the people who celebrate certain billionaires becoming trillionaires, or this idea of like, oh right, cool, I had more numbers in my column than you did, mine won. And to me that almost feels a little bit like the same mentality. It's like, well, it doesn't affect your life. In fact, it possibly might make your life worse, but like it's not that it makes your life better, but it's almost like you're supporting something like that. And I wonder if anyone else has ever had that kind of thought, because unless some very weird things happen, we're probably not going to sit down in a room with most of these people. And yet daily we hear their names.
Yeah.
And it's just like, what a strange time we live in, he says every day. But what a strange time that we live in, that there is so much discussion at levels. And I think maybe this is it. Sorry, you're getting word soup, and I apologize. But I think it's because, in a way, this should never cross any of our radars, because these are tax brackets that don't exist. They're that big, and yet it does affect our day to day, because it will affect Star Trek. It has affected Star Wars. Just have to throw that in for Tom there, because Star Wars.
Thanks.
No problem at all. And it affects music. I mean, Warner Music, for example. Things like that. Obviously Sony, Disney, all of it. So it does affect things, and there is a knock on. And maybe just to try and put a full stop on my ramble, Tom, you goose. No, you mentioned about like Brandon was saying, like about this sort of this punk that comes out of this kind of thing. And what if we're about to see the rise of like micro budget film studios that are all like this kind of indie thing, which we have seen before. I mean, yeah. I'm pretty sure the horror genre exists, as a big one. So a lot of sci-fi as well. It could be not that this would be a good thing for the industry, but that good can come from this in opposition to these conglomerates, to these mega corporations. I'm not going to lie to you. I enjoy Marvel. I enjoy a lot of Disney. I'm not going to lie to you and say I don't watch big budget movies. I do.
Yeah.
But having the freedom to make a little film about 4 boys walking down a railway to go find a dead body. Imagine pitching that today. No one's going to make it. Stand By Me, it's my favorite film.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
What you're saying is, we all grew up in a world where there was different types of movies and different types of media made at different levels. And the older we get, the less that's becoming a thing. And
there's a lot of homogeny.
Yeah. When everything's the same. What's that phrase from The Incredibles? When everybody's super, no one will be.
No one is, yeah.
Thanks, Syndrome.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Sang Syndrome, the oddly unspoken hero of The Incredibles.
I don't know about hero, but he was right about a few things.
Yeah, yeah. That's dangerously close to it. Look, I can understand some of his points.
All I'm saying is,
yeah. And we're
I'm one
gonna
bad
move
day away from
swiftly.
becoming the Joker. No, I think this entire situation is just kind of like I was saying earlier before we started recording. It's kind of the inevitable outcome of a society that measures success in dollars. And the only way that I think we can fight that is to intentionally make things that exist on their own outside of that. Push boundaries, make things just because, even if they suck, like just get stuff out there, not to like saturate the market or whatever, but just make art. That's really the crux of it.
I agree.
100%. Now, we are going to move on to our next section of the podcast, but because this is a video, thank you everyone so far for watching along and for enjoying along. Please make sure you're following us on the various socials. We're at TrekCulture, at TrekCultureYT on Instagram. Please make sure that you are subscribed. All of our socials will be there as well, because Tom puts them in every video like the good boy that he is. Everyone, you're awesome.